Welcome to our third and final UIA UDN webinar. What's the phrase? Time flies when you're having fun. So we've had 3 intense sessions over 3 weeks. Thanks so much to all of you who have been with us through this really comprehensive journey. Today we will be looking forwards. We'll be projecting into the future. Talking about some of the key lessons we've learned along the way in this kind of roller coaster UIA first period. Also looking at what happens next in terms of structures, in terms of content. So that's our kind of focus this morning. If you just jump to the next slide, I'll just remind you of our etiquette. Sadly, as you know, in these days, we're still locked down and speaking to you from our kitchens, spare bedrooms, all the rest of it. So we're going to try and be as interactive as we possibly can be, but here are the rules for this WebEx session this morning. We'd love to hear all of you, but if we had all of you off mute, we'd not hear anything at all. So you're being asked to keep yourself muted at all times. Also keep your cameras off in terms of bandwidth and everything else. I can see we're already using the chat box. So the chat box is a space for comments, for questions. If you want to share links or post material that you think is relevant to the conversation, that's where to put it. We are recording the chat box. We're recording these sessions. We are capturing all of the material to share with you later on. So you don't have to take lots of notes. You can just focus on what's happening. Feel free to participate, and we're going to try and join and involve you in other ways with a poll at the beginning of this morning. We're also going to try a little word cloud exercise later on. So the idea is to make it as interactive as we possibly can within the limits of an online session like this. So we ask you to participate actively, to be reactive, to be as engaged as you possibly can this morning. And we're looking forward to a fantastic session, because I think it's fair to say they've all been brilliant sessions, but maybe we've kept the best to last, because this is a great lineup this morning. And on the next slide, if we can just move forward, we can have a quick overview of the session. I ran a session last week where someone said, well, we would have all this normally in a day, and then we go out in the evening, we'd have a glass of wine or a beer or something. So we'd have like 11, 12 hours together. Sadly, we are having to compress these kind of events into 2.5 hours. So it's a big ask of you and also of all of us. But here's the lineup today. So shortly we'll go out and see who's in the room. We're then going to have James Rampton from CSES and Francois Gallaga, who you will remember from last week's session, picking up on some of the key messages from the UIA assessment study. The assessment study is, from memory, 147 pages long. It's a doorstopper, so it's nice to have James with us to pick out some of those headlines and help us kind of focus in on the key messages. Francois will then pick up and look forward and talk about what happens next. So how does the world look beyond this first programming period for UIA? We'll be coming back to that question later on. We're then going to focus on this key issue of innovation. How is this helping us understand success factors, conditions which help and encourage innovation? So that's going to be our first panel session, and we've got 4 fantastic speakers who you can see on the screen there, and we'll be introducing later. We'll then have a short break. After the break, we'll be again keeping this forward-looking focus, looking at the European Urban Initiative, the proposed new mechanism to try and create a stronger and more coherent ecosystem between all of these different urban policy initiatives and interventions. So we've got a panel which will be moderated by Pia Laurila from the European Commission DG Regio, again with 4 really knowledgeable and experienced speakers giving their perspectives on this key question of scale. So how do we scale? How do we widen the reach? How do we make sure these initiatives and the UIA work gets further and has more impact? And also, how does that connect with the structural changes we're going to see through EUI? So that's going to be a really interesting discussion in the second half of our session. We then got something really interesting lined up to finish with. Many of you will have heard of the new European Bauhaus, this new really exciting kind of moonshot type innovation approach. So we've got delighted to have Xavier Troussard from the Joint Research Centre in Brussels, joining us to talk us through exactly how this is going to work, where it connects with this bigger picture conversation about all these other initiatives, and also how you can find out more and get involved in the new European Bauhaus as it rolls out. We'll have a bit of time at the end for hopefully a few questions, and then I'll ask Tim Caulfield, Director of UIA, and François to rejoin us just to wrap things up. Whew, I need to take a breath after that. That's a bit of a gallop. So that is everything, I think, in terms of the agenda. I can see we're busy jumping in from the chat bar. That's fantastic. Please look at some of those little tips. If you want to share with everybody a message, make sure you click the everyone button, not all attendees, because otherwise it gets lost. We have our colleague Anna trying to fish any missing questions and pop them across. So hopefully we won't miss anything. Let me bring it in just now, my co-moderator, Amélie Cousin from UIA. Good morning, Amélie.
Hi, good morning, Eddie. Good morning, everybody. I'm happy to be with you all for this last and very popular webinar. So many participants again today, more than 500 participants connected right now, so it's good. As Eddie said, feel free to use the chat on the right-hand bar of the WebEx screen, share your views and questions, and don't forget to send them to everyone in the chat to make sure that it will be visible for everyone. So right now we are going to start with finding out who is in the room. So get involved with the poll. Vasily, can we start the poll, please? Great, thank you. So you have 1 minute to answer to the question. So what kind of organization do you represent? There's a lot of different answers. Please put your answers, click off one of those. You have 1 minute. So do you represent a managing authority, a national ministry, a city authority, regional authority, university, research body, NGO, or do you represent an organization from the private sector, EU institutions, EU program initiative, or other organization? Click on one of the answer. We are now 5,044 participants, so I hope we will have a good answer rate for this poll. So 10 seconds for you to let us know which organization you represent. Okay, great. So we have the results now, and the biggest response groups is the cities, people from cities, with 24% of respondents. Not surprising for such webinar. They are our main audience for this series. So welcome again. We will also get an interesting view of people from the private sector. There are 17% joining us today. And then a small number of people from managing authorities, regional authorities as well, university and NGOs, and yeah. So as during the previous sessions, and I think we will have the chance to hear about very different voices. Please share your different perspective on what we are going to talk during this webinar in the chat, and send your message to everyone. Eddie, I'm handing over to you.
Thanks, Amélie. Great stuff. I guess one of the things which is distinctive about UIA is, we see these collaborative partnerships delivering the project. So it's hardly surprising then that we have this nice, range of stakeholders in a conversation like this. Again, not surprised to see almost 1/4 of our participants are city people, but a great mix. So great to see you all. Thanks for joining us. We're going to keep moving. We're going to jump into our first presentation slot. As I mentioned in the overview, this UIA assessment study published, shared. We'll share the link actually on this presentation also. We've got a double-handed presentation. First of all, James focusing on the key messages, then Francois taking you forward and looking ahead into the future. So I'm going to pop my microphone off and invite James and Francois to pop your microphones and your videos on. James, great to see you. Thanks for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Eddie. And thank you for this opportunity to present. So I'm from the Centre for Strategy and Evaluation Services, and we undertook the assessment of the UIA at its midpoint last year. If we could go to the next slide, please. For those that want the details, here's how we did it. The key point is that we covered the first 4 calls, that there have been 5, and there were 75 projects that had been funded, although only 12 had actually been completed. So it was very much a work in progress. And you can see there that we consulted various sources. Okay, the next slide, please. Okay, for those who don't know, the Urban Innovative Actions is an EU programme, and it intends to promote sustainable, scalable, transferable innovations in cities and by cities to address a range of urban problems, whether they're environmental, economic, social, and so on. It's a European Commission managed programme, but it's done indirectly by the Commission via the Région Hauts-de-France in Lille, who do the day-to-day management and administration and monitoring of the programme. The funding is allocated via calls. There's these are based on topics, so there's 3 or 4 topics in each call, and 12 topics have been covered in all, and they're in line with the urban agenda for the EU. Each project can apply for up to 5 million euros, and that's 80% of the total project cost. And over those first 4 calls, 372 million had been allocated. Each project must be led by an urban local authority as the lead applicant, but they are required to form a broader partnership of other actors. And the range and the number, the range and the role of those actors varies from project to project. In some cases, the private sector partners or the NGOs may be very, very prominent and perhaps doing most of the work, whereas in other cases, it's the local authority very much driving it forward. So there's great diversity there. And the projects have 3 or 4 years of implementation, plus some time for knowledge transfer. So it was fascinating to find out what the projects have actually been doing. They funded a diversity of innovations, as you can see there. And in the report, we actually present a typology. That typology was not present at the outset, but we were able to discern it from the projects that have been funded. So some examples include a minimum income scheme for residents in disadvantaged neighbourhoods, a personal carbon trading scheme, career guarantees for young people, and a service to testing the use of autonomous buses to solve the first mile and last mile public transport challenge. These innovations have produced a diversity of results, or are expected to do so, and you can see there so different services, products and processes, platforms, and so on. So some examples would be new local energy systems using renewable energy, refugees and migrants having access to new and innovative approaches to employment, training and housing, new housing units created, new business and innovation hubs established. A common theme was that many projects had faced delays in starting and implementation. These were particularly related to infrastructure and equipment, perhaps as to be expected. It's in common with other programs. And there are also challenges related to innovation. So some of these are new and untested technological or technical innovations, and that creates its own challenges as problems arise that weren't foreseen. Often regulatory frameworks are not designed to support such innovations, and there can be challenges there. The public may misunderstand. There was a case of a factory for recycling construction waste, and there was a public misunderstanding there about the location, so there was a great deal of communication that had to take place. And target groups the take-up may be higher or lower than expected. And that's in addition to some of the usual problems around construction and infrastructure projects, around procurement permits and so on. There are instances of innovations being scaled up in the same city or region, but it was still quite early in the programme for the full potential to be realised. Okay, the next slide. So at the programme level, the consultations showed very clearly that the cities appreciate the UIA instrument, both in terms of its design, the rules, the application process, and the support offered by the Secretariat in Lille. And it's also evidenced not only by the feedback, but also by the high demand for funding. Encouragingly, the selected projects take place in a diversity of cities. There's 68 cities implementing 75 projects. These ranged from very small cities, there were groupings of cities of less than 50,000, and then there's medium-sized cities and some very large cities. And the largest was Greater Manchester with more than 3 million people. And they're in a diversity of contexts as well. So the European Innovation Scoreboard has a categorization of countries at 4 different levels according to their innovation. And the projects were reasonably spread across all of those innovation contexts. So from the modest countries with modest innovation to those classified as innovation leaders. As I've said already, the urban authorities play a key role, but the role varies in terms of the nature of the role and the extent of that role. And there is potential for, and some instances of replication in other cities, particularly where cities are engaged in the URBAC network or they make their own bilateral links to promote replication. Okay, the next slide. So you can see the allocation of funds by the topic. You can see it's very well spread there. The 3 largest topics on the left, they actually featured in 2 calls, so you'd expect more funding to go to them. But there's a good range of topics funded there. Okay, and the next one. Some challenges at programme level. So there was a good spread of applications with 26 member states represented, all but the smallest, Luxembourg and Malta. But actually 50% of the applications came from Italy and Spain. And we didn't quite get to the bottom of why that was, but for some reason the programme was particularly popular in those countries. But the selected projects were actually quite well spread across 18 member states, and that included some in the EU 13 countries who joined the EU since 2004. They were slightly underrepresented, but much better represented here than in most parts of Horizon 2020. As we said, there were challenges with projects getting going, so that suggests a need to strengthen their operational readiness. And sustainability and scaling up was somewhat of a mixed picture, with many of the core innovations being sustained, but the full activities of projects not yet certain to be maintained. And then there's challenges to replication by other cities. Funding is an obvious challenge, but also the transfer mechanism by which cities transfer their experience to other cities, and that other cities need to perhaps a bit more support to receive. And finally, the outputs and impacts are so diverse, and this reflected the freedom that was given to projects to define their own outputs and impacts, and that created some challenges for the evaluation in terms of aggregating the effects. Okay, the next slide. So the added value for cohesion policy, there's clear coherence and complementarity with mainstream programmes, partly by design, but partly by outcome. There's potential for replication with most projects taking place in cities that have EU funding for sustainable urban development strategies. And the managing authorities for ERDF programmes see the projects as coherent with those strategies. And so there's clear potential for mainstream programmes to scale up and replicate innovations. And indeed, the managing authorities are open to that. But of course, they face competing demands for their funds. And finally, the last slide, please. The recommendations for the future is to retain the fundamental elements of the design. It works well, it's appreciated by city, there's high demand, but perhaps better define the type of innovations to be pursued. Cities were given quite a free rein, but maybe there's a need for a steer at EU level to shape that. As I said, there's a need to strengthen the scaling up and transfer and perhaps new mechanisms at EU level, and to improve the operational readiness of projects, as we said, in order to reduce those delays. And finally, mainstreaming through cohesion policy could be increased by some elements of design to align the calls more closely with mainstream programmes, and also to improve the information flow to managing authorities. So thank you very much. I'll hand over to Francois.
Thank you very much, James. Good morning. I hope you hear me well. For those of you that were not connected to the last webinar of last week, I'm Galaga, and I work in DG Regio as part of a team busy involved in the design of the future European Urban Initiative, together with, among others, my colleague Pia and L'Oreal, that will give you a complementary insight on where we stand later this morning. From my side, I have this delicate mission to bring you through Commission takeaway from the rich work undertaken by James and his team in a bit less than 5 minutes now. So I apologize in advance if it gives you the impression of a fast play presentation, nothing to change in your settings. I will try to be both concise and clear, and I hope that the slides that will follow will give you sufficient information for further reading later on. So to start with, well, here are the recommendations that James just mentioned here, reformulated a bit as our drivers for the future. Well, first, to consider that with UIA, we have already a meaningful model in place. Like any instrument of the first generation is perfectible, but we can think its reform in terms indeed of evolution rather than of revolution. Second, this idea that we have to step up a bit our game when it comes to definition of the impact that we expect on the type of urban innovations that we will be targeting in the future. It's the same as concerns sustainability, scaling up and transfer that require proper incentives to materialize a bit more often than we, as we would expect. Finally, this idea of optimizing the added value of our pilot projects within a revisited set of services to cities that will constitute the basis of our future EUI for the benefit of cohesion policy more widely, and in particular of the ERDF, which is our main funding source for this new instrument. Next slide, please. Within this general frame, there are probably two dimensions that condition perhaps more than others the success of the whole reform process. Well, first, this issue of a closer definition of urban innovations that we'll be targeting with the EUI, not as any instrument dealing with, among others, with dealing with innovation, but one set with certain purposes which differ from other sources of funding. There are different avenues mentioned in the assessment study. I've selected here a number of building blocks that could be probably the closest to what DG Regio would have in mind for the future. First, this idea of a closer focus on urban innovations for and led by cities. We are very much interested in building the long-term capabilities of urban authorities as key players of local innovation dynamics. Capabilities both internal, agile organization settings, resources management, but also capacities seen from the external world, the way the cities provide for a vision for the future, and also leadership in animating local alliances for innovation. These capabilities have a lot to do with innovation techniques, new forms of governance, and ways to interact with target groups, which are very much connected to our cohesion policy objective 5 for Europe closer to citizens in the future. And well, in the same vein, the relevance of our proposed innovation with regard to the ERDF will be better looked at also in the future in the light of the priorities set in programs or more globally. We would also consider what I called here the urban megatrends, all one makes the attractiveness and sustainability of cities, and also their resilience in the situation such as the one we are facing with COVID-19, which could bring us, for instance, to look into the potential of projects from the perspective of their contribution to green and digital transitions. And finally, because innovation is also sometimes more to do with the environment within which an innovation is tested rather than with the innovation per se, we will be trying to pay a more precise attention to the contextual element within which projects are operated, which would bring us possibly to target areas with specific needs and handicaps, or that may have been built on an underdeveloped innovation ecosystems for the moment. Next slide, please. Another key priority for us will be to enhance the transfer solution offered. It has always been a clear ambition of the UIA, but built-in incentive has been far too small. There is a significant room for improvement here, and we are thinking about a combination of two types of solutions. The first one is already underway and builds on a method on URBACT program. Our partners in URBACT have launched in November a call that will see the first transfer networks implicating UIA projects to be initiated in the weeks to come. And this pilot could be the start of long-term cooperation by which the program URBACT 4 could play an important role for transfer activities of the UIA project as they get completed over time. The other options that we are considering very seriously is to embed transfer activities in future EUI innovative actions. The testing of new solution would continue to principally take place in a given locality, but the resulting experimentation would also be followed by partner cities, possibly from abroad as well, that would learn as a contact of innovation leaders. With such a formula, actually, the transfer could be seen as not as a complementary or optional activity, but something that would be an integral part of the projects and a kind also of obligation in return for the funding received. We believe that the combination of these two options could be convenient in order to avoid relying on a system that would depend mostly on the goodwill of beneficiaries that we fear could rapidly reach its limit if we do not have built-in incentives and proper instruments. Next slide, please. Now, while implementing the recommendation foreseen in the midterm assessment still implies for the Commission to strike, if you wish, the right balance between stability on reform in view of a number of variables, the pertinence of the options that we have on the table, the complexity to roll them out, and budget implications. As you may know, the budget that we will have for EUI will be significantly lower than initially foreseen, from the 500 million euros proposed by the Commission to 400 reached in the compromise between our co-legislators. So our evolution scenario, as you can see it on the screen, could be a sort of gradient of options that fluctuates between a minimum upgrade of the UIA model to options of a deeper reform intensity that we consider also worth considering, but maybe perhaps a bit more resource intensive, so which needs perhaps to be looked at a bit more in details before being endorsed. So if we look to what it could look like here to start with our future calls, an upgrade would make us continue with calls organized at European level based on teams defined according to Commission priorities in a way that would be fully aligned and consistent with the new Leipzig Charter, whether expressed in its thematic pointers, green, just and productive cities, or urban governance principles that I said earlier are of first relevance for cohesion policy objective 5, place-based, integrated, participatory approaches. In order to raise the readability of project also with regard to cohesion policy, we might also wish to refer to policy objective or specific objectives as more convenient, and as well to a list of indicators to be used by our project applicants. Beyond, there might be some margin to consider, considering the scoping of our calls, not systematically at European level, but why not at another scale, depending on the urban challenge that we would be willing to tackle, or formula towards greater bottom-up identification of topics through surveys or all the means that will be made available under the EUI to interact with cities. Next slide, please. If we move now to the selection process, in a way here you see on the left part of the slide the way as the selection procedure was carried out for in the past. A minimum upgrade of this scenario would make us, let's say, revisit the articulation between what we call the strategic and operational assessment. For example, the criterion on innovation will be revamped around some of the criteria that I mentioned earlier, and sustainability and scaling up from the one hand and transferability from the other will be distinguished as two separate criteria to be assessed separately. Beyond, we could be thinking also of further re-engineering to make the access to funding perhaps less resources intensive for cities, and avoid compromising too much between innovation and operational readiness. Why not by exploring the merits of applying so-called two steps application and selection procedure, as it is done for other EU funding sources. Next slide, please. The rules for implementation now, well, essentially they will be kept as they stand, except, which would be already quite significant on all what could be related to the need to embed transfer activities. We would also envisage making an update on eligibility to the extent that it would be relevant to ensure a kind of alignment with cohesion policy rules, and also streamlined the major changes procedure. If we would like to go a step further, there would be also some possibilities there to explore different intensities of funding, for instance, to accommodate for the development of concepts while reserving perhaps biggest financial envelopes for projects with greatest upscale or transfer potential. To maximize the impact of our still modest ERDF envelope, we would be also thinking about the merits of increasing partners' contributions or making it variable depending on where a given project takes place. Next slide, please. Just to say, well, this would be, in a nutshell, what we can say at this stage about the key pointers, if you wish, for the future, and the many variables on which the Commission is still reflecting, knowing that our actual decisions will be taken according to a time frame that you can see on this last slide that will keep us busy most of this year, from the launching of a call for expression of interest to the appointment of an interested entity for the indirect management of the EUI, with whom we will be willing to work together in order to be able to publish first calls in the course of 2022. I hope I have not been too long. Eddie, now I hand over to you. I'm ready to interact as much as I can through the chat to the questions that you may have. Thanks again for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Francois, and thank you. I mean, you really had to kind of gallop through that. There was a lot of material for people to absorb. So I just say to our audience, so a couple of things. The first thing is to say that Pia Laurila will be making a short presentation before the next panel before the panel session in the second half, to say a little bit more about EUI and to complement some of the messages that Francois shared with us there. So if you're struggling to process all this stuff, then don't worry, there's a bit more chance later on to hear some further details. I'd also underline that this is one of a number of events. This is an ongoing dialogue. There'll be other opportunities to connect with this conversation as things evolve, and as Francois just said, at the timescale you can see there, the timelines and the key milestones in terms of the coming months. What I suggest, Francois, we've got a few questions, but would you mind answering those in the chat bar? Because we're going to bring you back in later on at the end, but just now we're running slightly behind schedule. So if you don't mind, we're going to jump into the next panel session. But thanks a lot. That was really helpful. We'll be sharing all of your slides, of course, so everyone will see the material and they'll have a chance to come back and pick up some of these questions later on in today's session. Thanks to James. Thanks to Francois. We're going to keep moving on. As I say, we're trying to catch up a little bit here. So we always want to do these sessions differently. We always want to try something new, try something a little bit different. So we're going to go out to the audience now. If we can have the next slide, please, Estelle. So we're going to use another tool. We're going to use the Slido tool. Many of you will be familiar with Slido. It's an event polling software tool. And you'll see the instructions on the screen. We'd ask you to go into your browser, mobile phone, tablet, whatever it is you're going to use. Join the Slido, jump into the Slido website. You can see the link there on the screen. That will prompt you for an event code. Our event code is there. It's N553. And when you pop that code in, you'll be redirected to our event. And we're going to try and create a couple of word clouds. So, we're just switching our screen. So we're jumping from the presentation to shortly. You'll see the Slido screen from the guys at Teamwork. So we're going to ask you two questions shortly. The first question is, what do you think are the conditions which encourage innovation? Okay, which factors encourage innovation? So we've talked already about some of the kind of background issues. We've picked up on some of the success factors. So yeah, great stuff. So I can see people are jumping in. If you haven't used this before, if you like one of the words on the screen, you can use the same word and that word will get bigger the more people back it. If you want to come up with a different word, then jump in and add that different word. We currently have 644 people in this session. We've got, you can see the numbers of people who are jumping into this conversation now. So a really interesting, fantastic picture appearing on our screen. So cooperation is still the big ticket one in the middle. Closely linked to that is trust, which is something we associate with cooperation, of course. The figures are jiggling around, but I can see funding, obviously, we talked about. Love, we might come back to love shortly, actually. Bottom up, curiosity, openness, trust we just mentioned. So let's just leave that running for a couple of more minutes and then we'll freeze the frame, and I might take a little screenshot of that to tweet later on. And Ophelia shared the tags. If you want to capture this and share it with the planet, then please do through the usual social media channels. And Ophelia shared the hashtag links we're using. I'm just going to capture this just now before we stop it. Yeah, lovely. Okay, let's stop that there. Let's just freeze the frame. So shortly we're going to have our panelists join us. We'll ask our panelists maybe just to pick. I'll maybe ask each of them to just pick out one of these words which really kind of rings true for them and connect with their own sort of understanding of what are the priorities we need to encourage innovation. So that's super helpful. Let's try another one. Let's do a second one before I invite our panelists to join us. So this is the flip side. So in a sense, this is two sides of the same coin, but what are the things which inhibit, prevent, stop innovation? What gets in the way of us trying to break these patterns and trying to create new innovative ways of doing things? Okay, I can see there's an immediate picture emerging, which is really good to see. So bureaucracy, red tape. I think we heard about, James mentioned red tape in the presentation he gave just now. Regulations, corruption is in there, which we haven't really talked about, but that's I guess if you're looking at trust and transparency as being key factors to encourage, then things like corruption and red tape are the opposite sides of those, which really kind of block our creativity. Silo thinking, we might talk a bit about that in our panel. These departmental blocks which prevent us working transversally. Again, that's a key thing we see in many of the projects we're working on. Okay, lack of expertise. Yeah, okay, let's give that another 5 seconds or so, and then again we'll freeze the frame. If you want to capture that for posterity and send a postcard to someone via Twitter or Instagram or some other mechanism, then feel free to do it. Okay, let's stop the music there. So bureaucracy, corruption is higher than I would have expected, so that is really interesting. Silo thinking, thinking in boxes and the need for us to break out of those. Let's look around the edges. State aid, selfishness, risk aversion, tiredness. People are exhausted at the moment. We're super aware of that. So again, that's a kind of key thing to capture. I'm just going to capture this. There we go. Right. Okay. Thank you. So as we are segueing back to the slides, I'm going to ask our 4 panelists to pop their cameras on so we can see them and I can introduce them to you. We are really, really happy to have a fantastic mix of speakers, and we deliberately invited 2 UIA cities. So a bigger, well-established, well-known UIA city was Rotterdam, and very happy to have Hendrik Jan Bosch joining us from Rotterdam. We also wanted to invite a smaller city, and we have Ventspils in Latvia, Laura Coderi joining us, who's from the Next Gen Microcities project. Each of them will introduce themselves shortly and explain who they are and how they fit in. And then externally, we're very happy to have Sena Stegbedzi from the OECD, who are doing some really, really interesting benchmarking analysis work around urban innovation, which Sena will talk to us about. And then last but not least, Martina Pertoldi. Many of you will know Martina from the Joint Research Centre, who was with us on the UDN sessions, which we ran through for the handbook, which we ran through November. So fantastic lineup. My brief to each of the speakers has been, first of all, to have one slide which shares some headline messages linked to this theme of urban innovation and how we can encourage more success. So let's jump to Laura's slide. I'll maybe ask Laura to introduce yourself, Laura, to maybe one of those words you were attracted to in the conditions, maybe pick up on that, and then maybe just give us a little flavor of some of the content you have on the screen there. Laura, great.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us.
Yes. Hi, thank you. It's good to be here today. I'm Laura Chodere. I'm from Ventspils. I work in Ventspils City Council in Economics Department, and I'm the project manager of Urban Innovative Actions Project, Next Generation Microcities. And well, I saw that in this Slido, the one of the factors that support and encourage was the think outside the box. And when I made my presentation, this slide, I definitely did think outside the box of this one. And if you look at the drivers that I have shown here, then of course, you may ask, what is Ddm approach? And I would like to say that it is data-driven decision-making approach. And this approach usually helps us that we have made some analysis and some data. And I think that this is one of the great drivers that will lead us to make innovations, not to fail more often. The second one is being bold, of course. And being bold, it means that you are the one that is not afraid to take risks. And I think that if you want to innovate, you need to always be aware that there is always huge risk that it might not happen. So then the third one was enabled society. Well, enabled society is the one that actually this is a capable society. It is interested society. It is interested in everything that is new and that we want to innovate and what we want to do. So it means that that kind of society always are one of the biggest drivers in any kind of project. And if we talk about the blockers, I would like to say that FOMO, or it is psychological phenomenon, it is fears of missing out approach. Usually we want to make everything that everyone else have, but we don't know how to do it. And always I would like to say, I mentioned that usually it's pretty big risk that yes, we want to do it, but we don't know how, and then we spend money and we jump in and we don't have any kind of results. So it means that this actually, I think, is one of the barriers, and that's why I showed here. And the second one was sticking to known. Well, we sometimes, especially in small cities, in small towns, we are thinking a bit more like in stagnant way, like in old-fashioned way, and we do not want to change anything. And this is one of the biggest blockers, especially in municipalities, that we know what we have done before and we do not want to change anything. And that is one of the biggest reasons maybe why we do not innovate. And the third, but not the least, of course, is the exaggerated artificial activities, or you can say it is opposite of enabled society. This one is good because it's, for example, if the main driver is the municipality only, then municipalities' focus should be enabled to the society, not enable the activities, projects, initiatives. Otherwise, there are two risks. First of all, municipality does the things they believe should be done. And the second of all, the society becomes less enabled, as there has always been someone who is driving activities and they just follow. So the municipality should be the following society, not the other way around. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Laura. That's fantastic. And this thing about sticking to known, I guess, also links into the whole thing about attitude for the kind of appetite for risk, how comfortable we are making mistakes and kind of falling down, getting up again, which is not always easy. I know there are cultural differences across Europe around this, but generally speaking, you know, we're not always conditioned to taking those kind of risks, and you know, there's a whole fear of failure thing, which we might unpack a bit further. Thank you very much, and thanks for explaining DDDM, data-driven decision-making approach. So that was one of the questions I had on my list, so thank you. Let's jump from Latvia to Rotterdam. Jan, this is a great, I don't know whether this is the SS Rotterdam, but it's a great naval image. So thanks for joining us again. Just talk us, introduce yourself, maybe pick out one of the words from that word cloud, and then just kind of walk us through those 3 key points you have there, please.
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Hendrik Jan Bos. I work for the City of Rotterdam. I'm part of the funding and grants team. I was also the project leader of the Bridge project, one of the completed UIA projects from the first call. And the innovation we proposed in the Bridge project was the career guarantees for young people. Actually, adding 2 words from the word clouds, trust and bureaucracy. We are a relatively large organization, 12,000 employees. And that means that trust and bureaucracy are key factors in our innovation capacity. Short explanation of the 3 factors which are shown on the slide. We love it that our colleagues work in vertical silos, because that allows them to be specialists, and that allows them to stay specialist, and if they are new to become a specialist. But it's important that they are connected to the specialists and the innovators of other silos. So a functioning network is of utmost importance for us. What we also see is that when you're good in your topic, you need help to navigate your ways across bureaucracy. So we also need the network for the connection between the specialists and the supporting departments of the city. You can get support from procurement officers, from City Hall, from the grant office. So that is very employee focused. Trust is not, in our case, the trust that we think the employees will perform the plan, but that they are intrinsically motivated. So that's the key of our innovation strategy. The second one, a safe space for experimentation, goes both ways. The organization should feel safe. Sometimes you do an experiment and the politician will get into trouble because it fails. He or she cannot explain why a lot of public money went into a failed experiment. But more importantly, the innovator should feel safe. He or she should feel safe to experiment. An experimentation sometimes asks for different roles than you are good at, especially when you cooperate with external partners. Sometimes you get into legal problems, sometimes you get into financial problems, and it's extremely important that the organization has your back. So safety is extremely important. And the clarity of purpose. If you are a supporting staff member for an innovator, you should stress the importance that the innovator explains his or her theory of change. What are you planning to do? Make it clear, otherwise you cannot help him or her.
Thanks a lot, Hendrik Jan. A couple of things, I'm sure people are picking up all sorts of things from those key messages. I mean, a couple of things I latched onto. One was you mentioned of intrinsic motivation, and the kind of the psychology of this. What are the sometimes the named person isn't because they've got that job title, they are not necessarily the person who is the right person for that job, because you say you're looking for somebody who's really passionately committed to the objectives, and that was something I picked up on. And the other thing is this phrase used about people have your back, and that implies that there are kind of leadership implications there, political support, having that green light to experiment, and that's that safe space, as you mentioned. So all of those things are implicit in that notion of having that protection and that green light to to explore and to try different things, which and as we know, if it's genuinely innovative, then it's not always going to work. So there is embedded in this is a whole concept about risk and trying new things and breaking out of our existing patterns and what we know. Thanks a lot, Hendrik Jan. Good to see you. We'll bring you back in shortly, but I'm going to jump from our two UIA cities. Let's bring in Sena from OECD. Sena, thanks for joining us. Again, slightly different perspective because, well, you can tell us yourself what you've been involved in, but maybe ask you to also pick out a couple of those words from the word cloud that maybe caught your attention, and then just say hello and talk us through some of the things that you're sharing on the screen this morning.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sena Sigbedzi. I'm from the OECD Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions, and Cities. And I manage a project on innovation capacity in the public sector, in the local public sector, I should specify. And we've been doing a study since 2018 on innovation capacity. And the word you asked that jumped out at me in the word cloud on success factors was innovation culture. And I believe a lot of the words that came out were about and a part of building a culture of innovation, cooperation, having trust, being a risk taker. So I think that encompasses a lot of the words that came out. And then a lot of the things I saw in our study. So we talked and we asked cities the same thing. We have now 140 cities that have participated in this survey, and things that came out important to their innovation success or their ability to innovate was having a strong leadership commitment and support. And this can be at all levels, but in particular, we're talking about mayors, but a lot of cities also had chief innovation officers or chief data officers that were running this work, and having their support meant a lot. Having a strong team or dedicated staff. So cities said you need someone thinking about this all the time, right, to make it happen. And that if you're going to have those happy accidents, it comes from someone being in the lab. So you need someone thinking about this. And then a focus on data and measurement also. We asked cities where they had sufficient data to do innovation, and we started seeing some regional differences, which I can share later, but having this as a tool to be able to either prove your innovation is working or get lessons from your inputs is important as well. And we asked cities, of course, about barriers, and there were both internal and external that came up as well in your Slido poll about constrictions, restrictions with how the setup of the city is, silos, some funding issues, a risk-averse culture, and we get into that culture discussion again, having restrictions and regulations and rules that came up as well. The technological infrastructure sometimes was an inhibitor. And then we talked about trust, and this lack of public buy-in is really a barrier as well. And we've been running this program since 2018 and have done the survey twice. And what has come up is not very many cities are doing this systematic, comprehensive evaluation and monitoring. They don't have that practice. They check in, of course, on their programs and their practices and their activities, but this sense of these recurrent feedback loops haven't been built into the project, or there are opportunities to build that in. So these are some of the highlights from our project.
Thanks a lot, Sena. And I was saying, we had a chat earlier on saying, if you haven't looked at this work, I think the OECD have done a brilliant job in terms of packaging and presenting a complex range of data and information in a really highly visual, really attractive, accessible way. So it really is a kind of go-to reference, I think, for many of us working in this kind of urban innovation space. And maybe something we'll come back to, Sena, in the second round of the conversation is, I mean, you mentioned in the work that, 50%, only 50% of cities had an explicit innovation strategy. And this whole question about the extent to which this should be transversal and cross-cutting and everyone should own it, and therefore it's embedded and it's baked in, or whether it should be separate with an innovation officer or with a separate kind of entity of its own. And there are pros and cons of both, of course. So we might pick up on that in the second part of this conversation, if you don't mind, because I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. But for now, thank you. Let's jump to our fourth panelist, Martina Pertoldi from the JRC based in Seville. Martina, again, I just invite you to introduce yourself. Feel free to pick off the same words if the words that grab you from the word cloud were already picked up, and just again share with us some of the things you've put on the screen this morning in the PowerPoint.
Yes, thanks, Ed. As I just said, I work as a researcher at the Joint Research Center, which is the in-house science and knowledge service of the European Commission, which has been created to support European policies with independent evidence. In the last years, in my unit, we have been increasingly developing our research activities in the field of urban matters. Just to mention a few examples, we have recently published the Future of Cities report with a chapter on cities as innovation hub that could be of interest to you. Or I could also mention the Science City initiative managed by JRC, where we work with a group of cities interested in better understanding how science and research can help develop evidence-based policy making at city level. More specifically, my research team is working on the concept of integrated approach to urban development and how it is implemented by urban strategies that receive cohesion policy funding under the Measure for Sustainable Urban Development. You may be familiar with this measure, the Article 7 in EU jargon, ERDF, of the RDF, of the Regional Development Fund. As a result of this work, we have published the Handbook of Sustainable Urban Development Strategies. You see here in the slide the website of the handbook online that was presented also in the last UDN webinar series last November. So sustainable urban development strategies represent for me the entry point into the topic, and in particular those features of the integrated approach that I've thought not intended, let's say, to immediately serve innovation purposes, have introduced some novelties in SUD strategies, sustainable urban development strategies, that enable indeed innovation. So with thinking about the words that have been provided by our audience, indeed many of them refer to the integrated approach and how we have operationalized through 6 building blocks: the strategic dimension, territorial focus, but in particular governance, cross-sectoral integration, funding and finance, and monitoring. I would say that all of them somehow relate to the need to overcome silo thinking, to increase cooperation. Indeed, we can see many connectors between integration and innovation. Regarding the key messages that I want to pass, indeed, I would like to bring forward 3 messages, considering where we are, what has been done so far, and what is ahead of us. So in this case, we can see that we have favorable European frameworks in place. On the one hand, we have integrated and place-based approach that is gaining importance in the EU innovation policy debate. And on the other hand, cities are regaining control of innovation agenda at the local level, with emphasis on collaborative models, participation, and strategic thinking. So I bring here a perspective from the point of view of EU policy, which somehow complement what has been said before by the other panelists, thinking more at the level of city action. So looking at EU policy, we see that city innovation is at the core of different programs, from EU cohesion policy to the new mission-oriented approach of Horizon Europe, for example. And not only we have different favorable frameworks, but there is also an increasing alignment in their approach, with emphasis given to fostering new alliances and coalition for change, involving a wide range of stakeholders and achieving broader development goals. So I see here huge opportunities. Also, we have evidence that in spite of the fact that innovation is not the main goal in applying an integrated approach to urban development, it has indeed built capacity for city administration to perform activities conducive to innovation. So, for example, with regard to SUD strategies, we have 40 strategies that include research and innovation investment, for example, with investment in research infrastructure, but also soft intervention with the promotion of innovation-led business ecosystem. And in spite of the fact that this number is not very high, in my view, it marks a step change in the approach to urban development under cohesion policy, signaling a departure from the traditional focus on economic and social regeneration of the private urban areas and a replacement by a novel focus in innovation. Also, it's important to mention that almost 40% of SUD strategies address innovation, entrepreneurship, ICT, and 25% of them address participation and social innovation. Moreover, for strategies, the majority of them that not address innovation directly, we can see an impact on factors enabling innovation, like, for example, increased institutional capacity, knowledge management, and setup of collaborative platforms that bring together different actors that animate co-creation networks. Also, for the future, a key factor, in my opinion, will be a better coordination of city initiative with the EU innovation agenda promoted by cohesion policy that is operationalized through smart specialization. We have a good example, for example, regarding SUD strategies, where the city of Reggio Emilia, with a very, very low budget for a city initiative, has been able to implement an incubator for social innovation, promoting bottom-up projects and also promoting co-design processes within the city and with citizens. And with this project, the city wants to accelerate a transition to the knowledge economy and connect to the regional smart specialization focus of that region on cultural and creative industries. So I see here the possible way forward to better mainstream, as it was suggested in the previous intervention, action on innovation within cohesion policy. I will be happy to.
Okay, thanks, Martina. Thank you for that really comprehensive overview of the fit. And I think interesting from I think it was James's slide earlier, which said that 70% of UIA projects are in Article 7 cities, so that we can see this real kind of meshing between the sustainable urban development approach and urban and the innovation conversation. So lots of things for us to dive into here. I mean, what I'd say is that obviously this is one event today. There'll be lots of other spaces for us to continue these conversations as the European innovation community comes together. I'd like to go back to Laura and to Hendrik Jan, though, just to pick up on some of these points which have been raised about the culture shift. And I guess, the €1 million question, lots of ways, is to what extent has having a UIA project helped move the dial in terms of the innovation culture and the way that you address things in the city. I maybe ask you first of all, Lauren, you mentioned in your initial input some of the shifts in the way you're trying to work. You talked about the importance of data-driven stuff, taking risks. You also talked about some of the risks of being boxed in and doing what we've always done. Just explain for us the benefits, or has it been helpful hosting a UIA project in terms of shifting some of those attitudes within the city to innovation?
Definitely. I would say that actually without the UEA, we wouldn't find out the way that we can try to experiment and innovate in such kind of like a sandbox. We are trying, we are making, we can fail. If we do not know how to do it better, we can stand up again and do it again. So it means that while implementing our project, we actually can take a risk to try, but still we have a backup that we are just experimenting. but usually, of course, we are the society that are willing to win, that are willing to try and do our best till the end. So it means that we has given to our city a chance to make those innovations and things that we actually without this project would not happen at all, I think. And yeah.
Remind us the population, the size of Ventspils. How many people, how many citizens do you have?
We only have 40,000 citizens.
40,000. And does it help? I mean, sometimes if you all know one another and there's a smaller, is that, and sometimes that can be actually a disadvantage. So is it helpful having that, the size matter in this conversation, or is it irrelevant?
The size matters at all, actually, because we are only 40,000 inhabitants, but in this project, we are 2 cities, also with Valmiera, and together we make 70,000 inhabitants. But in Ventspils, actually, sometimes it's advantage and sometimes it's disadvantage, because advantage it is in those, well, advantage it is when it's needed to make community together and ask them and to involve stakeholders and do it as one big city. But disadvantage also when if you take a municipality, then we have a lot of departments that is under the municipality, and if the municipality thinks in the one way, then actually all the others want to think in the same way, and they're not willing to try or to test or to look around and do something different. Actually, it's like there's it sounds maybe a bit old-fashioned, but if there's the dictator ahead, then it dictates what and how we all will do. So this is disadvantage in those cases.
Okay, thanks, Laura. So that leadership thing is clearly critical, no matter what size the city is. In the case of Rotterdam, you're about 650,000, Hendrik, and depending on where you draw the lines, you might look at a city like Rotterdam, which has this amazing reputation for being a leading edge, innovating city, that you might think it doesn't really make much difference having a UIA project. Can you tell us, did it in terms of this innovation culture, maybe pick out a couple of things which shifted in your opinion as a result of the project which you guys ran there?
Yeah, we had one successful and completed UIA project, and I think the biggest shift for the project team and the various departments they were derived from was that we are mainly an action-oriented organization, and at the start of the UIA project, we had the evaluating team with us all the way from every project meeting. The guys from the university were there to reflect, and so we saw a shift going from action-oriented to also include reflection-oriented innovation. And these, I think, were the biggest advantages of having a UIA project. But with one thing nobody talks about is that we also had 2 failed applications. And what we learned from that is that the clarity of our purpose, the way we thought through the intervention logic was just not good enough, and we should improve our game in that respect. So I think UIA sets the bar really high also for us, and sometimes we can reach it and then use it to go further, and sometimes we're just not good enough.
Yeah. Can I just also maybe pick up this question of working across silos, because we've got lots of stuff going on in the chat bar, some of it around the fact that each department has its own drivers, its own impact measurements, its own language and culture, professional training. So, as you said, these silos are super efficient, but when we're trying to work across them, we bump into all sorts of difficulties. Can you maybe say, because you mentioned this cross-departmental issue, I mean, what specifically were you doing that helped open some of those doors between these silos in the Rotterdam experience?
One of the discussions in the chat bar was about bridging specialists. And I think that's something we did with the Bridge project. So it was focused on the education department, but I was the project leader and I work for the city development part of the city of Rotterdam. And I think in the city of Rotterdam, with the 10,000 to 12,000 employees, we have a very strong core team of supporting staff. So these are consists of the mayor's office and the legal experts, and basically they provide basic services, and they are there to cover your back when it goes wrong. And then the silos just they are concentrated on doing the work and being good at doing the work. And I think this sort of balance between centralization and decentralization for our city at this point in time, I think works really well.
Okay, thanks, Hendrik. And then are those lasting things? Are those things which have stayed? I know Martina wants to come in. I'll bring you in a second, Martina. Those changes, have they been, because sometimes people shift back to what they did before. Have there been kind of legacy structural changes as a result of what's happened with Bridge, or have we all gone back into our shells after this initial experience?
No, I think it's still in the city of Rotterdam, and also with the partners in where we cooperated with. It's still the project which gives us happy memories, which is the best way to continue the work. And last Monday we applied for cohesion policy funding from React EU. This was also mentioned in the second UDN webinar, and we are preparing for parts of this challenge and the proposed solution to continue in the regular ERDF funding in 2022.
Okay, thanks, Hendrik Jan. I'm going to bring Martina in. I'm conscious of time. The clock says we have 10 minutes. We don't have 10 minutes because we're running slightly behind schedule. So the clock's not quite right. Martina, do you want us to come in? And then I'm going to bring in Sena, just ask Sena for some final thoughts on tips you might share with some of our audience about how we get better at all this stuff. But Martina, did you want to jump in there on the back of what Hendrik Jan said?
Yes, indeed, because the example of Rotterdam is a very clear example on these possible synergies between urban innovative actions and SUD. For example, we had the case of Rotterdam presented in the UDN webinars on the strategy dimension building block. Indeed, with their investments under TO8, on education and training. So you see that the different threads are coming, are connected, and this is increasing because innovation today is more and more the result of the intelligence and knowledge is distributed among the society at large. This calls for a new role of cities authority in being able to orchestrate local innovation system and mastering knowledge gathering capacity. In other words, to elicit, blend and mobilize that knowledge that comes from different stakeholders, from different programs, from different projects. We have analyzed this when looking at SUD strategies. For example, this has emerged in terms of capacity of city authority for acting strategically, being able to build synergies with other policy frameworks, not necessarily under the responsibility of the city authority. So in a way, we are addressing here silo thinking 2.0 because we are thinking about silos in an horizontal way between department, but also silos between city level, managing authority level, EU level. And a very good case is also that is also presented in the that was presented in the UDN webinar series on the handbook is the case of Bilbao, where, for example, the urban innovative action has been packed with the sustainable urban development strategy, funded investment, Horizon 2020 calls, research and innovation investments under the regional smart specialization strategy, in order indeed to implement the city transformation agenda. So in a way to really scale up what are the different opportunities given by the different tools and instruments. So that would be my I mean, I don't want to take more time, but indeed the synergies both horizontally and vertically are in my view a key topic for innovation scale up.
Thanks, Martina. This conversation will continue, I'm sure, after today, and there's lots of stuff going on in that chat bar. I'm just going to conclude our session here by asking Sena to rejoin us and maybe just reflecting on what we've been hearing, Sena, and maybe from the work that you've been doing at OECD, maybe to if we have cities out there who are looking to really kind of raise their game, you know, kind of move the dial a little bit in terms of how good they are at kind of putting innovation into practice. What are some of the kind of key tips you might leave them with and invite them to think about as we wrap up this conversation this morning?
Yeah, so when we started out on this project, we tried to find out what is making innovation tick in cities. And we boiled it down to 5 components that if cities invest in, could amp up their game. And the first is having this recognized strategy throughout the whole organization. And we get into how do you break down silos and things like that. This could possibly be a way of generating this cross-departmental work. The other is having a structure in place and staff. Like I said before, someone needs to be thinking about this all the time. About 90% of the cities said their staff person had a project management background. So this is a person that hopefully can work across silos, building this culture and helping the innovation grow. The other is, funding is a two-sided coin. Sometimes scarcity does lead to innovation. But if we're talking about transformative innovation, building this habits throughout the administration, there are some funding implications. And some of about 81% of the cities had earmarked funds from their municipal budget to their innovation work. Not that it covered everything they wanted to do, but they had been putting their, money where their mouth is to try and advance this work. The fourth is data, taking advantage, using your data. And this comes into the barriers that we also lifted up. How data is collected, at what level is different from different departments. So there were kind of structural barriers in how to, the data wasn't transferable. So finding ways to be able to use and work from the same data set can help in this way. And then the last is, and I mentioned before, this monitoring evaluation practice that allows you to see where you're going, and that loops back into having a strategy. If having a strategy in place allows you to set goals, approaches, have a definition for innovation in your administration, and then having a monitoring practice allows you to see if you're reaching those goals.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Sena. Thanks to all of our panelists. Thanks to Sena, to Martina, to Hendrik Jan, and to Laura for a really, really good discussion. Apologies that we didn't, as ever, have the time we wanted to have, but lots of things we're going to. I'd invite our panelists. Now you've got a bit of time after this session to have a little look at the chat bar. If there's anything you can jump in and help our participants unpick, that'd be super. Lots of things being shared. We didn't even talk about citizen participation, co-decision making, so a whole heap of stuff which we'll have to deal with another day. There will be other days, there will be other events, other opportunities, so don't worry if we haven't got into the detailed things you wanted to talk about just now. Thanks again to our panelists. We're going to take a short break. It's now almost 20 past. Let's come back at 25 past. Let's take a break for 5 minutes, go and have a stretch, go and have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or a cigarette if you still haven't killed the habit. Get a bit of fresh air, and we'll see you in 5 minutes' time. Thanks again to our panelists, and we'll see you all shortly. Okay, thanks a lot. Hi, everyone. Francois set the scene for our next panel session, which is looking at the European Urban Initiative. We are delighted to have Pia Laurila moderating this session. Pia is going to get us started with a short presentation just to set things out. You can see our panelists on the screen. I'm going to hand over to Pia. If you want to pop your camera on, Pia, and your microphone. I will mute mine to kill this horrible background noise, and looking forward to hearing from our panelists. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Eddie, and good late morning from my side, and welcome to this session that is indeed focused on the innovative actions in the context of our novel instrument, European Urban Initiative. So my name is Pia Laurila, working at the European Commission in DG Regional and Urban Policy, and at the unit where we are designing this novel instrument hands-on, together with colleagues Francois and all those of you who are behind this webinar today. And we have a very highly interesting panel, 4 members with us to discuss, and I will pretty soon invite you to introduce yourself, but at this point you are also very warmly welcome. So in this session, we are looking at the future of innovative actions. As part of this European Urban Initiative. And while we do so, we are trying to explore the ways how the outcomes of the innovative actions could better reach across the Europe. And here what we are really, let's say, focusing on, it's all about those tested novel experimentations, the novel solutions. We will look into the thematic topics or knowledge on thematic topics, but also on how to make innovation happening in a city. And here I see my colleagues, we now started this short presentation on the main elements of European Urban Initiative, as we wanted to give you a short, let's say, insight that you get to the same page. What do we really mean by European Urban Initiative? So here on this screen, you see the basics. The overall ambition of the European Urban Initiative is really to offer more coherent support to cities. And what we mean that we want to address and interconnect the current landscape of multiple initiatives, programs, and instruments that we have under cohesion policy. And we have the two objectives here: strengthen integrated participatory approach to sustainable urban development, the very key principle of cohesion policy approach, and also provide a stronger link to EU policies, in particular to cohesion policy. And this very much resonates with the previous discussions 1 week ago, how to mainstream innovative actions to the cohesion policy programs. These two aims we will tackle by working in two areas, and you see them on the right-hand side here, two strands, as we say: support of innovative actions, and the second one is support of capacity and knowledge building, territorial impact assessment, policy development and communication. And as for the beneficiaries, the initiative is really for all EU urban areas, be it large, small, medium-sized cities, really thinking about functional urban areas and urban-rural linkages. And we are also offering support to the urban agenda for the EU and the intergovernmental cooperation on urban matters. So those are also in the focus of this initiative. I think my colleague Francois already referred to that the proposed reduced budget is 400 million now. And in this context, I think I also need to mention that our co-legislators already early on in the negotiations, they made an amendment to Commission proposal and removed URPACT from the proposal to the, let's say, European territorial cooperation part. So there is an issue to find coordination and complementarities. So having said, the first strand is support of innovative actions. So what does it mean? It means that the current generation of urban innovative actions will kind of transit and become an integral part of future European urban initiative. So there will be no longer a self-standing urban innovative actions program. I will not go to the details of all those, let's say, exciting new parameters, drivers for the upgrade of the current to the future. You heard from François and James this morning. Maybe just to say that we have already achieved concrete, let's say, activities. For instance, I think François pointed out this Urban Innovative Actions Transfer Network called under URPACT, and now we are piloting it and learning for potential future continuation in terms of the transfer and of the novel solutions. But the important point here is to say that once we have innovative actions as a part of European Urban Initiative, it means that the other activity areas will be at the service of innovative actions. And I will now briefly go through the main lines of action. Next slide, please. So let's look at the capacity building part. I think my colleague, if you can move on. Here you see on the left-hand side the visual entitled URPACT, Networks of Cities, and this is really here to make a point that once it will continue in parallel, it will build on its successes of supporting transnational networking of cities. We really need to find excellent complementarities so that the two instruments, European Urban Initiative and URPACT 4 in the future, work in tandem. Both contribute to each other's capacity building measures and also knowledge sharing. On the right hand of this slide, you see UDN type of activities, urban development network type of activities. And this means that we will continue this networking that we have started in this programming period. And when we think about UDN, this is really about bringing those cities that benefit from cohesion policy funding, including innovative actions and managing authorities, different governance levels, expertise, and even beyond urban agenda together. And here we will continue, let's say, EU-wide events, cluster of member states, and so on. But the real aim is to kind of build a capacity building community, space for exchange, to step up the activity from the current period. Another point to make here on this visual that you are looking at is that we will step up the peer learning type of activity. So we are proposing as part of this initiative kind of, how should I call, twinning of cities, urban practitioners with their peers in other EU member states. And this is this little balloon city-to-city exchanges that you see on the left. And on the similar line, we also propose to support peer reviews of cities. So this all means that we want to give, let's say, the voice to the local level, because this is bottom-up activity, the peer learning, that cities can come and express their interest, and then we support the activities in this peer learning. And also really important is to target newcomers in these activities. Can we go to the next slide, please? So here we now move to this second activity area, Strand B of European Urban Initiative, and there are quite many work areas, as you see. On the left, you see national contact points. So we are proposing to set up a national contact point network across the EU member states, and it would function as kind of an information and knowledge sharing nexus between the national, regional and local levels, and on the other hand, the European Urban Initiative. So it would feed the European Urban Initiative on the national and local context, inform and match needs and disseminate the EU activities then from the, let's say, more European level to the national one. And we are proposing that the member states would be responsible for appointing the NCPs as they see the best. In the center left, you see this knowledge sharing platform. And here the goal is evident. We want to have a central interactive place that would host the products and outputs of different work areas of European Urban Initiative. And the priority for us is obviously the cohesion policy knowledge coming out from the cohesion policy urban support tools, but also the urban agenda for the EU. And gradually with time, our goal is more ambitious to really link with the other pertinent initiatives in the EU. And we know there are many. We heard from JRC, OECD already today in the previous session. If we then quickly move to the, let's say, right-hand side of this visual slide here, you see that we are proposing also capitalization of knowledge activities. And again, why we do that, it is quite clear. We want to provide urban policymakers with, let's say, consolidated knowledge that really serves them in their policy making, and also aim is to improve the investments on the ground under cohesion policy. And policy labs, different policy reviews are the foreseen activities. And very briefly on the right-hand side, communication and dissemination, This will be, of course, in the radar key activity of European Urban Initiative. We will bring Cities Forum under this umbrella, our annual presence in European Week of Regions and Cities, and so on. I think I have a couple of slides left. We can go very quickly and flashy forward, please. So I started with the key features this presentation. I just to repeat the issue that urban agenda intergovernmental cooperation is under the remit of European Urban Initiative. And here in terms of urban agenda, as we have done already now since the start on the side of the Commission, we want to further deepen this cooperation and above all, stronger involve the cities. And also, of course, the key objectives of urban agenda to improve the impact of the agenda and its actions to the urban dimension at national and EU level. And with the presidencies of the Council, we are, of course, now negotiating on the details of intergovernmental cooperation support. Most likely, the focus is strongly on expertise type of the support. And now I think I turn to my very last takeaway message here. Next slide, please. So, yes, with this illustration, we want to pass the message that that all these multiple urban support tools are brought together under the same roof, into the same frame. We heard a lot in the previous session also about silos. We need bridging specialists. So the takeaway message here is that once we are ready to go, and gradually with the coming months, European Urban Initiative should really increase synergies between the innovative actions that you see on the left, between the capacity building and knowledge policy communication that you see on the right hand. And while doing so, very strongly, let's say, reaching out, complementing and coordinating with URPACT, and also with Urban Agenda for the EU. And the very important point is there on the lower part of this diagram is the member states, are those actors who are implementing the strategies on the ground, the SUD strategies that we really want to, let's say, interconnect with and exchange with. And I think here we are, maybe there is some timelines. François, my colleague, you already referred to this part. If I have a next slide, I just maybe very quickly repeat that we are now in the phase of, let's say, finalizing and further deepening our design of this initiative. We will soon launch the call for the entrusted entity for interact management. And next autumn, we will be really concluding all the contractual things, and we should be ready to start as from 2022. Further message from our side, of course, also is that during this transition period, we are not living in vacuum. We will continue our support services. We will be present at various events. URPACT, Urban Innovative Actions, will fly full speed. So this is really a transition period, but still a lot is happening as we experience on these past 3 weeks as well. So I think it's time for me now to conclude, and we go to the kickstarting our panel. And here I would invite the panelists to pop on your cameras, please. And I think to save the time, I think my colleagues can change next slide, please. We have 4 panelists. We have Torten Nielsen, director from Eurocities, Turmis Kuri, as well, director from Council of European Municipalities and Regions, Sabrina Abdi, director from National Agency for Territorial Cohesion from France, URPACT Managing Authority, and then last but not least, Chiara McCarthy, a member of European Committee of the Regions, and also I understand councillor of the Cork City Council. So I will invite you now one by one briefly, let's say, introduce you a bit deeper and tell your organization's connection with the topic of today to widen the impact and outreach of innovative actions in the future as part of EUI. And also, if you could pick one successful feature of urban innovative actions at this current generation that we should build on in the coming months. So, Dorte, I would like to invite you first. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pia, and thanks for the invitation to participate here today. So just by a brief introduction, as you've already said, my name is Dorte Nielsen. I'm Executive Director with Eurocities, with a network of larger European cities with nearly 200 members from across Europe. So from our perspective on what our role has been so far and how we've been following this, of course, I mean, since the start of the Urban Innovative Actions, which immediately caught on with cities, I think, as a great opportunity. We followed from the beginning and supported cities, of course, understanding what the program was about and accessing it to begin with, and also picked up feedback from the cities in the early phases of the project kicking off. So if I may, rather than mentioning just one, I have three positive aspects of the, but I'll be very quick. I mean, I think what our feedback reflects very much also the more formal survey, of course, the formal survey that's been done, which presented earlier. So a secretariat that is available and responsive and for cities to be able to contact directly, a flexible budget size for projects, allowing projects of different sizes. And then, of course, the focus on innovation, where which is constructive when it's also possible to try and fail, sometimes both in the project application process, but also in the project itself, which is when lessons are learned, it's a productive and constructive process. Thanks, Pia.
Thank you very much, Dorte, for these insights. Try and fail. This is very encouraging. So can we then move to the Turmis from CMR? How is CMR relating to the topic and your success feature?
Thank you very much, Pia. Thank you very much also for providing the slides, because that helps match us as well as speakers and panelists. So my name is Turmis, as you say. I'm the Director of External Resources and Knowledge Management at the CMR. CMR is the Council of Municipalities and Regions, and we are the oldest, let's say, association gathering a national association of local and regional governments from 41 countries, meaning beyond the member states. So our work is just to say a few words about ourselves. So our work is concentrated to two main pillars. One is linked to the advocacy and policy in terms of legislation in all areas that impact, let's say, municipalities and regions. And the second pillar that is very much linked to the topic today is about the knowledge sharing pillar, through which we are animating exchange of experience, lesson learned, and debates between our members and beyond local and regional government experts. So we work with, let's say, in the various areas coming from circular economy, climate, energy, digitalization, but the work and the topic of the territorial cohesion and urban development is a key interest for our members, and of course become a key priority for CMR Secretariat based in Brussels. We, just to make the relation with our work on this topic, we participate in 9 of urban agenda partnerships. We have been involved in providing feedback, in specs, and disseminate information activities to our members. We follow very close with European on the European urban initiative together with DG Regio, and my colleagues are following us today, are totally involved in such discussions. And the Urban Development Group of member states, we are a member of it. From a practical perspective, and I hope that this is also in response to some of the questions that I saw previously in the chat, we are also managing a specific program on sustainable integrated urban development. The tool is called the Reference Framework of Sustainable Cities, which is an online tool that helps cities to self-evaluate integrated sustainable dimension in their urban development projects and actions. So in the chat I provided the link, so I hope that this can also provide some let's say insights of how to better work in an integrated manner and a set of indicators that might be useful for forthcoming projects. So here is the link between what we do at CMR and the subject. And the second question, Pia, was about what I would say retained as a success factor. Indeed, as my colleagues say, it's mainly about the flexibility in terms of budget, but also to keep in mind that the very principal reason that of this program is fostering innovation and giving possibilities even to small and medium cities to try and to take risks. And that is a particularity that we should keep here in this program. I saw that the participation of small and medium cities in the last projects was quite high, even if we can say that some adjustments in terms of member states, let's say that were more focused on France and Spain, geographically some other efforts should be made in some other countries. And we welcome much this bottom-up approach for the design phase. Yes, that's mainly, well, there are quite a lot of things in assessment, but this is what I catched and digested very quickly from the presentation of previous colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Turmis. We move then immediately to Sabrina from Paris, France. Can you please introduce yourself?
Thank you, Pia. Hi to everyone. My name is Sabrina Abdi, and I'm from France, working for the National Agency for Territorial Cohesion, which is responsible for the managing authority of URBACT. Obviously, we work really closely with the Joint Secretariat with a dedicated team and strong expertise, and also the member states and association. As perspective, our common objective are to provide a clearer visibility on opportunities for cities that can benefit from and to ensure the most efficient complementarity and synergies with the EUI. The other point is that you had quickly mentioned it, and François also, URBACT has launched at the end of the year a call, which is now closed, to select a pilot project to pick on the dissemination of EUI that needs enhancement, and with a shared goal to make UIA projects more sustainable and successful. For the quick positive features, I will be really quick because my colleagues have mentioned a lot of positive aspects. It is obviously the ERDF co-financing, and also the flexibility and the simplification in the use of funds, and the possibility to have social but also physical investment under ERDF. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sabrina. And we move to Kieran. How would you see the success issues, and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Pia, and many thanks for the invitation this morning to speak. The Committee of the Regions is a formal EU institution. It's got 327 members, representing 1 million politicians in terms of local and regional politicians. We generally give opinion papers to the European Commission and try to work closely with the European Parliament as well. I think our relationship with DG Regio has got closer over the last 4 or 5 years, and also with the JRC and DG RTD. I think there has been a shift in narrative towards more collaboration, and that's very much welcome. I think as well as that, I've just spent, I think last year and the year before, I spent about 18, 19 months working on behalf of the Committee of the Regions on the Leipzig Charter, the renewal of the Leipzig Charter, of which the Urban Agenda was a part of. And the Committee of the Regions is very much committed to the renewal of the Leipzig Charter and the aspects of the Urban Agenda within that. We're also very interested, I suppose we're a co-host on the European Week of Cities and Regions, Pia, that you actually mentioned. So communication of anything to do with European urban initiatives is something that we can do. I know I'm personally a big champion, and I know the Committee of the Regions is a big champion of URBACT, Interreg, and Horizon 2020, now Horizon Europe. I think there's so much great work going on. that sometimes cities and regions don't hear about it actually on the ground. In more recent times, the Committee of the Regions has been championing I suppose the increase of percentage for the Sustainable Urban Fund connected to the ERDF and the Cohesion policy. We've done a lot of work on territorial impact assessments. We've done a lot of work on smart specialization. And at this moment in time, many of our local and regional reps are dealing with the fallout of COVID and the economic crisis that's going to come with that. So I think definitely the European Urban Initiative going forward is going to be of great benefit to anyone trying to deal with the fallout of COVID, which is something that we need to chat as well at some point in these seminars. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Kieran, and all the three of you for these introductions. What a rich ecosystem of support for European Urban Initiative we have here today. So I would then immediately jump into the panel discussion that we have these two questions. We should start with the key one. So how could the European Urban Initiative best transfer and disseminate those outputs coming from innovative actions? And here we refer to also the current generation, but of course to the future one, the thematic and innovation capacity knowledge to cities across Europe. So here I am just looking for your sign. Who would take the floor first and share your view on this central issue that we need to carefully think in setting up your urban initiative? Could we start with Kieran? Are you okay? Or Sabrina, who would like to? Sabrina, you are welcome.
Okay, so maybe to develop a little bit further for the pilot, which was launched at the end of the year. So this pilot to test the transfer mechanism is done under the current programming period, so under URBAC 3. So it will test the method, and with at least 4 European networks, also including UIA cities during the next month. This pilot will also benefit from the URBAC method on the classical networks, but also the transfer network method recently developed and based on the following step, which is understand, adapt, and reuse. So we hope that those results will feed into this potential mechanism for the post-2020 period.
Thank you, Sabrina. Yes, I'm sure that both sides, we are very much waiting for the results and experiences from this pilot that will come in the, let's say, 1 year of time, and we know more. Who would share next the key elements, how to best reach out with the outcomes of innovative actions to other cities? I see, yeah, please go ahead.
No, thanks. I mean, Pia, I think the roadmap that in your own presentation that you laid out is actually very good, and it's a great integrated approach. I think as well, like within the renewal of the Leipzig Charter, there was a roadmap for the EU urban agenda, and that roadmap that's there needs to be followed as well. I think that's the first thing. I do agree with the point on the national contact, create those national contact points. I do know that sometimes when you're dealing with local government, some of their functions can be centralized at national government level. I know that's the situation in Ireland. Sometimes it's hard to get alignment between the local and national. So to have national contact points, and maybe some of those could be within the managing authorities of the structural funds. I think that's something that should be looked at. I am delighted that URBACT will play a key role, as will Interreg. And I think somebody mentioned in the chat the EGTCs as well, who are doing fantastic work on cross-border cooperation. There's some really interesting methodologies coming out of those as well. I always think within the Committee of the Regions, and I've said it in numerous interventions, that how do we scale up, or how do we communicate what's going on in different EU projects, and how do we get those, how do we inspire people actually on the ground? And 2 years ago, the UIA did actually roll into my city of Cork in the south of Ireland, and Tim Caulfield gave a fantastic presentation. And my EU affairs officer and I were still stumped with trying to come up with an idea. But while we're doing that, like, I think we had something like 18 EU projects between Urbact and Interreg to deal with over the last 2 or 3 years, or my EU affairs officer had. So sometimes it's easier maybe for the local authority to go after Urbact or Interreg more so than the UIA. So I think more work needs to be done. I do know that my city council sees the UIA as the holy grail, is probably up there as trying to get European capital of innovation. So it's how do we inspire people to move on, especially if we're dealing with councils that have a lack of administration capacity. My city is 220,000 people. It's a third tier European city, and there are many others like that right across the EU. So how do we get a team on the ground? So I think the roadshow that DG Regio and the UIA have had the last few years have really worked, really inspired people. I know the European Investment Bank have been on the road as well, and I think that needs to be continued. So there are like 4 or 5 things I'd like to see done, and I might talk with European Week of Cities and Regions as well later on. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Kieran. All about also reminding really about the Untitled Charter that we really carefully follow and align to NCTs, and inspiring roads those people on the ground. Should we then move to the city networks? Could I invite maybe Durmis to take the floor, please?
Yeah, thank you very much, Pia. Well, I'm going to try to keep it short. So, let's say the best place to speak about innovative solutions, etc., are the cities themselves. So this kind of events that are organized by you are very, let's say, very important, so that it's the space also to share among us, but also between cities. But we understand that from the program side, we say that's hard to reach cities, and from the city side, and especially small and medium cities, they have difficulties to reach or access information. So here, I think something is missing in between, and that the city network can fill the gap. In terms of what we can do as a city network, if we see at the European level, for example, Eurocities or CMR, probably other sectoral city networks, we are organized around expert groups in a specific theme, so that a good solution can be a presentation of solutions found in the various projects to our expert groups, that in their turn they can share this information and those solutions with the local regional experts in their country. So, but this is when we come at the European level. But if we go down then to the national level, if I take the example of the city networks or National Association of CMR, for example, they have, let's say, the same kind of composition. They are organized around expert groups. So here, I think it's a good way to go through to strengthen the collaboration with national associations and city networks to present in their working groups experts that are composed of local, regional, from municipalities and regions. So here we have also a great occasion to pass not only information, but deepen the exchange in terms of expertise to really allow and transfer of knowledge. We can say that in terms of geographical concentration, I could say that mainly in the past projects were concentrated in Spain and France, probably geographically and a higher or slight more effort should be done to disseminate information, etc., to in other countries. If we speak about the size of small and medium size, let's say, cities, here I think an additional effort should be paid, because as the previous speaker said, sometimes resources are, let's say, very limited for small cities, and the tools, I'm going from the language skills, etc. So here I think a series of, let's say, challenges should be taken into consideration in order to reinforce the participation and the dissemination and transfer of know-how to small and medium-sized cities. In terms of, you are referring to the contact points, and we strongly welcome the use of the contact points between the URBACT and this program, just although that the information is lost, it's not lost, and to strengthen the collaboration between the national contact points and national associations, because through those channels they can ensure really to make a rural transfer of let's say, of innovative solutions. Yes, so I'm stopping here because it's a large subject to discuss further, but I hope I gave you, let's say, the main topics on which and the main ways we can work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Durmis, for a very important point and reminding of the importance of national city associations as progress together with the European ones and the small and medium-sized cities. We know this issue, and we are carefully looking into the issue. How do we reach out to those ones? I see that the time is running, and now I'm turning to Dor, the Eurocities. What would you pass as a key message here?
Yes, thank you, Pia. A few key messages, I think, if I may. So in terms of the transfer and dissemination of the outputs, extremely important, of course, to maximize the benefits of all the important results that are coming out. So I think there is one important point is that actually in the innovative actions that there is a strategy built in for transfer and replication and a budget that makes it happen. Then because if that's not the case, I think then all the good and comprehensive ecosystem that the European Urban Initiative otherwise creates as a context for the innovative actions won't be able to do much and won't be necessarily successful. So that sort of at the level of the project itself, I think it needs to be resourced, the transfer and replicability, as there is, for example, Horizon 2020 projects, as we've seen there. And then I think also maybe I think it's also important that the European Urban Initiative offers an extremely strong context and a solid ecosystem, of course, but I think it's also important to actually look beyond to maybe map your multipliers. And of course, I mean, with Eurocities, we see ourselves as a very natural ally, of course, in this process and one of those multipliers. But depending on the specific thematic focus of the different innovative actions, the multipliers will be different. Like the Living in the EU initiative, for example, could be one very important multiplier for the projects with a digital transformation focus. And then maybe a stronger collaboration with the specific focus on transfer and dissemination of outputs with your multipliers, so that we don't duplicate each other, but that we seek towards sort of collaboration rather. So, and you can of course count on us in that process, and of course also our members who are taking forward the innovative urban action also comes to us with the ambition of multiplying when there is resources available to it. And we've taken some of the a good handful of the previous innovative urban actions through our network and at least get the information out to those to our members where relevant. But it's also true that beyond sort of dissemination communication, the real sort of transfer and replication does need to be resourced, and we've done some tests on it in our network. We've taken some one project through our social innovation lab, and we're setting up another lab process with a working mechanism where you take sort of a couple of good innovative products from cities and you develop minimal viable product and white label, so that it is easier to use a much wider group of cities, and you can go from sort of 5 to 100 faster, hopefully. But it is resource intensive, and that needs to be sort of taken into account. I think it's also important for the transfer and dissemination that it also goes back into European policies then, and we also have supported some cities, like one of the previous speakers mentioned the minimum income scheme project, and the lead city, I believe it was Barcelona, came also to us and asked who to speak to in the Commission for the policy change that could also be inspired at the European level, which again is making the connections maybe outside the European initiative for a wider sort of policy change at European level. So those are just some of the points, but generally I think that the European Urban Initiative, the renewed impetus to the Leipzig Charter and the Urban Agenda, and the European Urban Initiative, so is on for a very good, hopefully a very good start for the next phase. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for these important messages to us, and also reminding on the strategy, as OECD we heard in the previous session, and map your multipliers. We will certainly look into these messages carefully. I see that we are really in end of the time. We have second questions to tackle, and I would propose that if you very briefly, in a half a minute, would say one thing that you see, how could we better reach new cities, newcomers into the European Urban Initiative. I think the second point of the question, many of you already provided inputs. We know how strongly you work, and we will work together on this challenge in the coming months. So what about the outreach to newcomers, new cities? And here, if we start, who would like to start? Should we go to the reverse order? Is it Sabrina or Kieran? Would one of you very briefly, we need to finish in few minutes.
Yeah, I can go. I think the European Week of Cities and Regions is a very important tool. I think as well more peer-to-peer learning. One thing that kind of strikes me as someone who's at the heart of the Committee of the Regions, I would argue that if I did a survey on members, I'd say maybe I wouldn't get a majority of members who would know about the urban innovative action. So I think more communication, more peer-to-peer learning. Like at this moment in time, the Committee of the Regions, the SETIC Commission have just signed off on a cooperation plan with JRC and DGRTD, and there's 28 actions in it. And it's probably the first time ever that some sort of a cooperation plan has been created between the Committee of the Regions and a DG. So we need more of that. I'm just going to say it, and also just to pick up in the chat, somebody kind of mentioned the unsuccessful applicants. It does look like that less than 10% of cities are not successful. But it is a great process to go through. But I think there should be something for the unsuccessful applicants as well, some sort of platform that they can stay on, that they can learn more how to go back in again. So yeah, those are my kind of my couple of ideas. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Kieran. What about Sabrina? We will continue.
Okay. So quickly, I will speak in the point of view of the member states, because in our agency, the aim is really to provide the support for cities. So maybe it's, as Kieran said, it's communication, but also provide to translate the lessons learned, the capacity building through national, regional, also local channels. We also work in concrete manner. We are launching a work inside our administration on how to better interlink with the NCP and the NUP of URBACT to be sure to have all the scope and to provide for the cities the capacity building and the activities they need to go to this kind of project. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina. Very, very important points. What about, should we have Turbis next? We have few seconds left. We have to close the session.
Thank you very much, Per. Well, you said a few seconds and I start now to be worried about. Let me say only 2 or 3 things that I can really resume a bit what I wanted to say. I'm just coming back a bit to the presentation from the OECD about the support from the leadership. let's say that it's important, first of all, that we bring in mayors, the leaders of the cities. And when it comes to that, I have some tips here. As CMR, we are organizing on annual basis events with 100 mayors around Europe. That can be a good occasion to attract their attention and trigger their attention to what we are discussing today. Such occasion is also at the national level. Through the various events, gathering politicians around statutory affair meetings. We have policy meetings, exchanges, debates, and forums. Therefore, we are glad to strengthen. I know that we have a strong relation with the region and working very hand in hand, but here I think we have still space to improve that synergies, to go beyond information sharing, to engage with mayors, new mayors. And from that perspective, they can let's say support the innovative actions in their cities. So there are a few tips. Thank you very much. I think my time is over. Thank you, Pia.
Thank you for pointing to the mayors, the importance of policymakers, political policymakers, let's say in that way. The very last word goes to Dorte at Eurocities. So I'm sorry for this pressure, but what is now the key message only?
So just in addition to what others have said, and I agree with all of it, I would emphasize also the national contact points, and that those national contact points must also be informed about other funding opportunities at European level that are relevant for cities, so the Horizon Europe program, Life Plus, for example, so that they can also ensure synergies with that and what comes out and what goes into the European Urban Initiative and the Urban Innovative Actions. So nothing further. Thanks a lot, Pia.
Thanks a lot, Dorte. So our time is up. So I would like to thank everybody for your very rich contributions. Unfortunately, no time to go to the chat bar, but I assure you that we will digest all the information on our side in our planning meetings carefully. We will provide, of course, all the material for you after this event. So it's time to thank you warmly, all the panelists, Dorte, Durmi, Sabrina, and Kieran. Thank you for being us today, and thank you for the audience for following, and back to Eddie. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Pia. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's a great session, guys. Thank you. That was really, really, really top notch. I really enjoyed that. Superb. And you connected the bigger picture stuff. You mentioned the Leipzig Charter, the Urban Agenda partnerships. We got right down to the granular level of the best transfer mechanisms. Thanks a lot to Sabrina for mentioning the URBAC stuff, and Adele's also been mentioning that on the chat bar. Thanks also to Dorte for saying, there are other ways of doing this, and I've seen some really interesting mechanisms that Eurocities have used to try and kind of kickstart and to kind of replicate good ideas. So lots of things going on there, which is super. Dermot, thanks for reminding us about the importance of leadership and picking up on the OECD points, which Sven made earlier on. And then Kieran, also this key thing about smaller cities and about the need to kind of build capacity. And for those projects which have not been successful first time around, Francois mentioned the seal of approval idea in our last webinar. So how can we support those through other mechanisms, which links into maybe the cohesion policy conversation, so we don't lose good things which maybe don't cross that line for UIA. All of that will be captured in our conversation in the chat bar. I'll invite our panelists maybe to reflect and have a look at what's on that bar, and if you're able to pick up some of those questions, that'd be really, really helpful. In the meantime, we'll keep motoring. We won't jump into questions because we're running a little bit behind schedule. I don't know whether you have any room in your heads for any more information. I hope you do, because we've got a fantastic opportunity in this final slot of today's session to hear about a new initiative, a new European initiative, also focused on innovation, also focused on the urban dimension. It is the European Bauhaus initiative. Delighted to have Xavier Troussard with us this morning from the JRC, not this time coming from Seville, in fact, coming from Brussels. Xavier, do you want to pop your camera on? Great to have you with us. I think you're going to share with us the kind of big picture concept of the new European Bauhaus, also talk us through how this is going to work. Again, this is an opportunity for collaboration, an opportunity for you all to get involved. So we welcome you, Xavier. Good to see you, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eddie. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to join your workshop today and to address your very experienced network, because I think you can bring a very strong contribution to our initiative. So the new European Bauhaus, and if you can put the next slide, is something which was announced by the President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, in a State of the Union speech in front of the European Parliament last September. When looking at the ambition, it's quite a wide-ranging set of ambitions. It's not about buildings, as many people think. It's about living together better, and it will become even more important after the pandemics we're going through. This is about having a new entry point into the Green Deal, and looking not at the problem side or the threat or the guilt, but rather the bright side of it, how it's an opportunity for us all, and it can become a positive experience for people. It's a transdisciplinary initiative that brings people together across the traditional silos. It's a design challenge, basically, and that's where the reference to the old Bauhaus is relevant, is that 100 years ago, this movement starting this culture has coined one of the core design principles that forms should follow function. But now we believe that design has to integrate the planet boundaries and also look at the people expectations in a more holistic way, and look at higher social purposes. So it's of course also about how we can bring new solutions to the market to make those solutions more affordable for everybody, and it's also a way to think differently at EU level, and hopefully to deliver differently. Next slide, please. If we want to look more into the content of the initiative, as I said, it's not on building, it goes beyond building. Yeah? We want to concentrate on the places where we live and the way we live in those places. So it can be the neighborhood, it can be your village, it can be also the way you move in the space, your way your lifestyle is changing. Yeah? And within those spaces where we live, the key added value that the new European Bauhaus intends to bring is a way to secure a better articulation, I would say even a maximizations of the benefits on three complementary axes. How can we make those spaces much more sustainable, including where relevant more circular? How can we make sure that it brings the beauty and the qualities that people are expecting from the places where they live? And how we can make those places more inclusive, including more accessible for everybody, including the people with disabilities or people in an aging society, but also the issue of affordability, and not something for hipsters in the center of big cities, but something for everybody. And the ambition is not only to change the mindset and the culture through conversations about how we want to live together in the future, but also to have tangible transformation in concrete places and in the business ecosystem, the construction ecosystem, for example, and on markets. Next slide, please. So how do we want to develop this project? I think we have three phases that have been identified. We are currently in the design phase, and I will tell you more in a minute. But at the same time, we are exploring how we could deliver on this initiative. And we foresee that once we have learned about what works and what doesn't work in terms of supporting this ambition, we will move towards disseminating the solutions across Europe and probably beyond Europe. So that's the plan. Next slide, please. We are organized in the Commission. I mean, we can move quickly, but clearly the Joint Research Center has been asked to coordinate this initiative for the role of the Commission and to shape it. But we work directly under the steer of the President's Cabinet, and there are two commissioners that have been given a particular role: Commissioner Gabriel and Commissioner Ferreira. And we work with many DGs, and there will be soon also a small group of personalities gathered in a high-level roundtable. Next slide, please. So the design phase is the phase that we have launched in January on the 18th. And here it's a broad invitation to all stakeholders and all interested parties, including citizens, to contribute to co-design this initiative. This is not something in which we, as usual, enter with a proposal and ask for comments on our proposal. We start with inviting in a broad concept people to tell us what they want it to become. So there's a broad invitation for people to organize events, conversations about the European values, and in particular to bring those conversations into the multidisciplinary dimensions that are crucial for the initiative, because we need new ideas, and new ideas come from the confrontations of perspective rather than from the views of established groups of coherent set of people, basically. There's also a collection of opportunities on the website to bring different examples. We're interested also in getting ideas and challenges. I will come back to that. There's a call for partners, and we will ourselves progressively organize events that will be also a way to make transparent the evolution of the debate about the European values, and then communicate what we see emerging as key topics. Next slide, please. So if you look at what we are interested to collect, so we're interested in examples because a neural network probably is one great source of a very inspiring examples. We are not building in the desert. There are decades of efforts in having more integrated, more holistic approach to local transformation. And so we are looking for examples that you would feel, or people would feel inspiring for the future of the movement. We're interested in ideas and visions about what the movement should be, how it could work, how it could be supported, but also the ultimate vision about what it should change and what it should aim at. But we're also interested in knowing about the problems, the challenges, the needs that people, the obstacles that people feel will be important to tackle. Next slide, please. With respect to partnerships, we're looking for partners at different levels, European, national, subnational. We want at their respective level people, of course, to become multipliers and have a kind of reach out capacity. We have them, of course, to have a relevant mission or a relevant activity for the powers and to be aligned with our values. But fundamentally, we ask them also to propose a set of initiatives, actions in support to the European Values Initiative, and that will be one of the distinctive criteria we'll use to select our partners. So the call will be a permanent call, and we have already numerous requests coming in. Next slide, please. So after the delivery phase, towards the summer, the intention is to come with a refined concept and a support framework. So we are starting already to work on this delivery side, pending the analysis of the inputs. One thing we have already decided to do is to have a first prize of the new European Values this year. It will be launched in a few months. And it will focus on these inspirational examples. So there will be a separate call launched on a website for different categories of inspirational examples. There will be then a selection process, and we would announce the prizes probably by the summer. That's the first concrete activity which will be carried out. But there's already the announcement that we want change to happen on the ground, and so we are exploring what are the possibilities to seed transformations that would be a bit exemplary for the European balance. And so we are exploring different tools to do that. And of course, if we are thinking in terms of transformation in various territories, the cohesion policy, the urban policy are key partners for us. We are also looking at what happens in the context of the missions. So we're exploring possibilities, but we will make some proposals with respect to selecting projects that would be exemplary for the European boughs. We're also looking at how we can channel some form of technical assistance to prepare local authorities for such kind of transformation and co-design processes. But it goes beyond the transformation in places. We have to look also at how we can create a pathway from ideas to the market in various sectors that are relevant for the new European boughs. And so we are also looking at how we can find some elements of support here that would be relevant. And then we have to consider a wider array of potential support elements. Some might be budgetary, looking, for example, at how in the education sector, there could be some interesting projects, but also non-budgetary aspects. So you have frameworks like the Leipzig Charter or the Davos process that are relevant for our context. And so we've got to understand how we can make full use of what exists in the field and whether there are gaps on which we should develop some particular initiative. So there will be, as I said, by the summer, a first framework that should come. But of course, this will be a project in which we learn by doing. And so there will be further developments down the road. And it's clear already that it's not a kind of one program initiative, but much more something that would build on various instruments at EU level. So this is what I wanted to share with you. Clearly, your network, as a very experienced network, has strong possibilities to contribute to shaping this project, and will also be interesting when we will refine the kind of support mechanisms and support frameworks. So back to you, Eddie. I mean, the next slide gives you some context, and of course the slides will be shared.
Thanks a lot, Xavier. Great to see you. If we just jump on to the next slide, we can just leave that on next. I know we've got people asking, how do we find out more? What, some detailed questions. So hopefully your answers will be picked up there. And again, Xavier's input has given us that good understanding. I know that big city hipsters in our audience will be disappointed that this is not just for them, but the rest of us will breathe a sigh of relief knowing that this is something which is open to everyone. I liked your open innovation principles, your reference to learning by doing. So many of these are touch points amongst the people who are involved in this discussion today. You also mentioned the word movement. And we can see this shift, and we've talked a lot about culture and attitudes today, leadership, all key components of this sense of being part of an innovation community and how we move forward. So Xavier, thanks so much. Great to see you. I know that there'll be other events, other ways to connect to the work that you're doing, but we really appreciate your time today, and thanks again. Good to see you, and well done for getting this fantastic thing up and running. It looks wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it just remains for me to say, as we kind of begin to wrap up here, on your screen you can see where you can find the content. We'll be coming out to you. Teamwork, Estelle and the team will be emailing you to send you these links, but just so you know, we talked about the knowledge management strategy in our first session for UIA. Please have a look at that. We've mentioned social media. We will be sending you a survey, because even though we're happy with the way these events have gone, they can always go better. We can always do things differently. Please take 10 minutes or so to respond to us, because it really helps us understand what you need and how we can continue to improve the way we work with you. Other links there about the urban agenda, and also for the UIA newsletter. Some of the work that Pia mentioned and that Francois mentioned to do with the EUI. Again, the links were there. So all of this is in play. You are part of the conversation. You are an important part of the co-design of these initiatives. So please play an active part. Thanks so much for your time. It's been a fantastic experience for me to be involved in these sessions and to have this really great chance to connect with so many of you, especially when we miss one another at times like this, when we normally see one another physically, and hopefully that will happen again in the not too distant future. I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to mute my microphone. I'm going to invite Tim Caulfield, Francois Gallagher to come back on and just say a few words of wrap up at the end, and then we'll close this morning's session. Tim and Francois, over to you.
Then I will go. I don't want to retain too much our audience here today. Well, my words, I would say, would only be to express my gratitude on behalf of DG Radio to all our moderators, not today, but out of the 3 webinars that we had, speakers, moderators, panelists. How counted that it represents nearly 50 people that contributed with their inputs to enrich our debate and with such valuable inputs in a way. And same for you to all connected together with us to share your views, making comments alive. I try to interact with some of you time to time in the chat and try to make it as lively as these online platforms allow. We had, let's say, an ambition through this series of 3 webinars, which was, well, first to give to know about the urban innovative actions, perhaps by their best ambassadors, the project promoters themselves. And I would like to thank you very much here. The second very important point was to try to frame the importance of what they are doing within this wider context of the current and the future cohesion policy. On all in all, to draw first solutions as well from the midterm assessment study and bring perspective, as we did today, from different public institutions on where we could go to improve the model through the European Urban Initiative in the future. And so, well, back we received a lot of messages, impossible to summarize them all, to be frank, right now. I will just retain, perhaps, especially from this morning discussion, that perhaps we might be going in the right direction with this very important focus that we will have to try to better define what we understand within EUI in terms of urban innovation, where all was mentioned this morning around building a culture of innovation, try to break silos, work on risk aversion that perhaps sometimes does not allow to be as innovative as we can to have successful projects. I also retain the very constructive words from our managing authorities that in the last session especially are very much willing to continue to do their work as facilitators of this wider deployment of innovative actions within cohesion policy. And also the words from the cities themselves, perhaps encouraging us to multiply the type of events that the one we have today. I think this is very much to what we will be willing to continue to do with the UIA Secretariat in the months to come through our management strategy and also beyond with the EUI in itself. We may also have, between the lines, perhaps heard a bit of an impatience as well on what will be the future topics, when the calls will be launched. And I hope that today you will have a better understanding also on our timeline and on further possibilities to interact between ourselves on pick up most of the ideas that came up from today's discussions. I know that the expectations
Tim is there now, so I don't know if you can see it. Tim's there, so I'm just going to invite him in there. So just to let you know, I'll just mute myself now.
Yes, perhaps. Perhaps I hand over to you right now, perhaps Tim, and I will come back with last word then. Later, please go ahead, Tim.
Thanks, Francois. Yeah, sorry about that. I probably call Amelie now. This is the last of the 3 webinars. It looks like it's been of great interest. I think we had over 500 people, participants, at each webinar, which is a great turn up. What has been interesting for me is that we had a lot of discussion over the chats, but also a lot of participation in the polls. There's been good feedback, there's been exchanges, also sharing of information. Unfortunately, we can't actually do that face to face, but at least this seminar, these series of seminars, has given us a good opportunity to exchange and to participate and to understand as well what is going on at a European level and also a UIA level. I hope people have enjoyed and also learned about what we are about the future as well. And we have got a lot of interesting panels, a lot of interesting discussion in the panels, as well as the presentations that have been given. Really a taste, it's only a taste of what UIA is, and also a taste of what those future arrangements will be. We hope you'll be inspired by it to actually go a bit further than that, use some of the good practices, also get involved in the future as well. So please don't hesitate to look on our website, to also look at the knowledge management. That was a paper that was shown earlier in terms of a link to that paper on our website. Got a number of activities that are going to be taking part on that. And I think that's what is coming out as well. People want to go and see what is going on, exchange about what is going on. Done a couple of those activities last year. We had housing, the UIA transfer networks we're delivering with URBACT, and also the mobility capitalization activity and monitoring and evaluation. I think that actually came out, particularly in this seminar, looking at innovation, how to use monitoring and evaluation as a tool to improve innovation, capacities on innovation. So we'll have a seminar on the 11th of March, a bit more detailed in terms of that. So please go onto the website and register for that. And then in the future, again, trying to link it also in terms of future provisions. We'll have something on just transition. We'll also have something on integrated approach, again, two aspects that came out today. And finally, also another key, and this is why we're actually working online, is the COVID issue, the pandemic that we're undergoing at the moment. We will also have a piece of work that is going to be delivered on that this year. So please stay in touch with us. Please stay tuned to us. Finally, I'd just like to thank a few people as well, because if it wasn't for these people, we wouldn't be here today. I'd like to thank particularly at the PS, the Permanent Secretariat, Raffaele, Amelie and Orphalie, who've put this together with the Commission as well as teamwork. You've done a great job and I really appreciate that on it. Also, it's not just about 3 or 4 people at the Secretariat. We've got John Christophe, we've got Camille, Heraclis, Isabella, Nasco, Nalida, Tommaso, Sophia, Agnes and Laurent. And over the last 5 years, they've really helped and they've really put the energy in place to actually get this up and running. And I think that's what I said at the very start of the first seminar, is that we didn't have anything at the start. And these people have really put something in place that is interesting, that is good quality, and that we can also take forward to the future as well. Finally, just regarding Eddie as well, thank you too. You've been a great moderator, really able to keep the flow going. I'd also like to thank the cities, experts and organisations that have participated in this. As I said, there are achievements, we've seen the achievements, a lot more achievements that we are delivering, but also there are challenges, there are improvements that we can make, and that's being integrated perhaps into the future. I say the future does look bright. We've got the new European Urban Initiative coming up, and this gives us a more coordinated and coherent approach. So something that I really look forward to, really positive element within that and coming out of the interactions element. There we go, that's my little bit. Amelie, as I said, no longer Amelie, I'm Tim. I'll pass over to Francois for the last words on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. I will not be, well, much longer than this, but I would blame myself indeed if I do not continue on your words to try to thank all those that make all this possible and give you this sort of, I hope, nice and natural impression that we were really nearly in a normal mode of exchanges and of discussions. You mentioned, of course, Eddie and Amelie, which were such a good masters of ceremony for us throughout these 3 sessions. Congratulations again to them. And yes, a marvelous team that we have also behind in order to bring the concept of the 3 sessions. You mentioned Team Raffaele, of course, and Amelie in the Secretariat. From the side of DG Regio, I would also like very much to thank my PR to accept to moderate this second panel discussion. Behind in the backstage as well, If they are not too shy, perhaps they could turn on their camera as well. I would like to thank very warmly Anna, Yanis, and Lambrini, also from our side. On our, of course, partners within Teamwork, Esther, Thanos, Angelikis. Thanks again to all. As I said, there will be other opportunities to interact in the future. Tim mentioned a couple of these opportunities, and I hope, who knows, hopefully, perhaps the opportunity to meet in real sometime soon. So I would say that it is probably the best will that I will make for all of us for today. And in the meantime, stay tuned and safe. And bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks a lot. Well, everybody. Great to see you. Bye.